Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Live Your Spa Life show. Spa life is a lifestyle that accepts that accomplishment and harmony coexist. The spa and spa life, the SPA, is for seek power always, that power within you to do your bigger work here in the world. I am so thrilled to introduce to you my special guest today, Lyndsay Oneal, who is a transformational coach practicing 10 years coaching over 2,000 people. She definitely loves working with people one-on-one and coaches from the inside out. Lyndsay, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you.
It's so good to have you here. And I really want to just jump into this whole conversation around internal breakthroughs, that there's those internal breakthroughs in power, healing, possibility. Can you speak to how people are radically clear after going through this process?
Yes. So I love to coach people from the inside out because I've noticed when people are really seeking power and seeking shifts, like having new results in their life, a new experience of themselves, often there's an assumption that it goes to like, what do I need to do? What's the list of things to do, external things to tackle? And while that might create some like small shifts, they usually don't last. So really working with people to dive into the insides, and that gives you clarity on who you are and where your power comes from, and has you see the things that are actually blocking your power versus just more things to go do. That usually makes it cloudy.
Right.
So when working with people to really focus on like, hey, who are you? What are the beliefs limiting you? What's the story you have around yourself? When those things get cleared up, of course, there's clarity.
Right. I love this so much. This is such one of my favorite conversations. And one of the things I always talk about is that, power, you are your own power, that the power is within you. And so many times people do look outside of themselves for that. What do you think is some of the things that block people from really having access to that internal power?
Oh man, so many things. None of them are complicated though. I think they're all fairly simple, and it just takes effort. I do a process with people around looking at energy leaks or power leaks, to kind of discern, evaluate what am I doing that might be leaking power. So looking at beliefs, thoughts, stories we have about ourselves, where that comes from, meaning like if it comes from other events in our lives, how we were raised, because usually we make up stories around it and then interact with the rest of our life as if it's true, like it's gravity. And that's a complete block. And then also looking at things like specific people that might be energy or power leaks. Not that it's their fault, but how we're relating to them. Also behaviors, things that we're actually spending our time on. Because usually it comes from, my experience is often it comes from places that we're not willing to look. So it kind of falls into a category of like pretending not to know.
Right.
And then once we do some digging, it's like, oh, wow, this is what's blocking me. This is where I'm limiting myself.
Right. So how do people actually go about actually digging to find those leaks? Like if they have a sense like, I think I am leaking power because I don't feel, strong, or things aren't on track, or there's indicators that that's happening. How do you actually go about digging to find out where those leaks are coming from?
Yeah, there's a few ways. I think some of it is just paying really close attention. Like I work with people to start to notice like, hey, what were you doing when you felt this way or felt that way? And start to hone in on, it's almost like if you're baking a cake, like what are the ingredients? Like which one of those ingredients doesn't quite fit? Which one do you have an experience around that doesn't quite feel this way? Or, wow, you felt terrible for like a day or 2 days or a week. What happened right before that? And starting to hone in on, was it a conversation? Was it a person? Was it like food or television or something that came up? Was it I wanted to do something big and I got freaked out, or I saw a ad in a magazine? There could be so many little things that kind of trigger it, but doing specific work to really evaluate it and then paying attention, moving through life in a way that's really conscious and noticing. Because sometimes too, I think that we have feelings or experiences that we dismiss. So most of it is getting those experiences on your radar so you can start to pay attention to them. So it's not that we don't see them or feel them. I think we just don't always realize like, oh, that's the thing that's actually not normal Like, it doesn't have to be that way, or it doesn't
Right.
happen for everyone. I can change this.
Right. Well, and that's the beauty of actually having these kind of conversations is that,
Mhm.
it's not that we need more knowledge per se. It's more of like that, the knowing, right? To being able to identify these kind of things. And I see
Mhm.
this as a process where, now you're having some more awareness, you're seeing where the leaks are. But then what would be the next step as far as, what do you do about it?
Mhm. Um, so one of my favorite questions or phrases is, the problem is not the problem. The problem is how I relate to the problem. So it kind
Speak
of creates
more.
one step removed, right? So it's not just if let's say that after some evaluating, it's like, oh man, when I'm around my mom or my friend or whatever, or when we identify kind of a thing that feels like it's the problem, actually seeing like, no, but what's my story around it? How am I relating to it? Because that's where the real possibility comes in. You might actually do something about the event, but it's the relationship to it that matters to pay
Right.
attention to. So then what you do about it, some of it is looking at like, okay, well, what are my options? How am I relating to it? What's the story I have around it? The meaning I'm assigning to it. That's what I mean by story.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then consciously either taking different actions, working with brain to like, okay, how am I thinking about this? And consciously choosing different thoughts, rewriting the story, and then what kind of actions. Um, and then on the flip side, um, I think great to be like, well, what is what I really want? What do I really want in this, or for my life, or who the person I'm committed to being? And I call this standing in the future, like painting such a clear picture around what it is that I want, and getting tuned in with that version of me, that woman. And then like, what would she do? How do I bring that future me into this present moment? Because that always brings different answers and unfolds a different path that's going to be distinct from whatever was leaking power.
Right, right. Well, it's so important to be in the present moment. We always talk about being present with someone and looking at where you are now. But when
Mhm.
we actually do become conscious of that, a lot of
Mhm.
times we notice we're thinking about things that have happened in the past, or
Mhm.
we're so, future focused that, we're not even taking the first step about being where we're at. So I love that awareness about really checking, first step is just checking to see where you are. Are you in this present moment, and are you able to do that? Which reminds me around, a lot of times fear can take people out, right? And so one of the things that you talk about is knowing that everything is connected and
Mhm.
how that ties into responsibility. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So first speak to the everything connected. For me, my experience has wildly been true that everything is connected, and I relate to that as it's happening for me, not to me, which immediately puts me in a place of power versus being in a victim stance.
Yes.
Um, and often, I just worked with somebody this week who had all these problems with her job, and she called me and she was like really worked up. And she was like, but this is and I asked her, is this a pattern? And she was like, yes, I've gone through this with like 4 or 5 different jobs. And I say this because most of her fear was rooted in the pattern of it, the repetition. So just in noticing like, hey, what you're up against right now, or what the thing that you're making new choices in, it feels so big. You have so much fear because one, you're up against your whole pattern, all the energy of your experience in this. So it's not as big as you think. You've just kind of collected it. And two, that means the opportunity is when I'm making a distinct choice in this present moment, it's an opportunity to shift the whole pattern. So even though there can be so much fear, working in what are the facts and what are the interpretations? It's one of my favorite simple processes. Okay, what are the facts that's occurring and what are my interpretations? Because the interpretations are where the fear comes in. They're not real. To give some discernment and more power in what we're doing to really disseminate some of the fear versus to try to avoid it or pretend it's not there, but acknowledge it, but separate it out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love for, our listeners to just
Mm-hmm.
really think about that because, where are you interpreting things versus, saying, hey, these are the facts, what is the actual information that is there? So tell me again that phrase.
I said, what are the facts and what are the interpretations?
Right. So
Um,
when you're looking at that, so many times we assume things are facts, but there actually are interpretations, right, of how we've looked at those. So when you kind of look through that, and I love also how you talk about the victim mentality in terms of, you know, what are things that are happening for us, right? That there's always something in there for us to be able to look at, and that, you know, we can all have victim experiences, but not identify ourselves as a victim. And it's what we step into with that. As you really talk around this process, you talk about responsibility being the gold. Can you really talk about how responsibility comes into the conversation with this?
Yeah. And I want to add the whole, like, it's happening for me, not to me. That's something we get to, like, a paradigm to go into it with. It's not, well, let's see how it goes. And then at the end, if I like the
Yeah.
result, then yeah, it happened for me. No,
Yeah.
it's like something that we can only really see it when we go into it trusting that it's happening for me. So responsibility. So I want to say I'm speaking to responsibility, like a capital R responsibility, versus, and I'll explain, versus accountability. Like, I'm accountable to pay my taxes, or I'm accountable to pick my kids up at school. So not like a duty. I mean responsibility, like, I'm responsible for my life. I'm willing to be in ownership of the whole. Like, I am author, creator, generator. I wrote the script, I hired the actors, designed the set, like everything that is occurring, I'm choosing to relate to it as if it's designed perfectly by me for exactly what I need right now, for exactly what I want, for who I get to be, for the breakthroughs I get to have, to be my most powerful version of my personal self.
Right.
And when I like have that paradigm on, that makes everything become almost like a scavenger hunt, or like, oh wow, I wonder what this is.
Mm.
And it's just so much, so revealing, and it puts me in a place of like everything has purpose, everything has opportunity, everything has possibility. And for me, that's like solid gold.
Yeah, I love that. You know, I'm such a big fan of personal responsibility, especially in a day and age where there's so much blame and pointing fingers, and, you know, the environments, the politics. I mean, there's just so much noise that's out there. But when we really look at what is our own personal responsibility in it and stand, I mean, we've all heard about, you know, responsibility is the ability to respond, right? How are we responding, and how are we standing in that energy? And with that in mind, you know, what is the correlation between responsibility and power?
So when, like I just defined personal responsibility, like author, creator, generator, right? Anytime I'm standing in a place of, okay, this is perfect, I created this for a reason, there's purpose here, that gives me a place of power, because then I can be in, I'm choosing this, it's happening for me, even when it's gnarly, even when it's painful, even when it's confusing, to have a paradigm I come from of like, okay, I created this perfectly for me, and I'm going to live into it that way. Um, that only gives me power, because it's either power or victim, responsible victim. There's no middle ground. It's like pregnant or not.
Right.
And from that place, then everything becomes mine, and I can own it. And because anytime that I'm in like, hey, this is happening to me, or I'm a victim of something, it's the same as saying I'm powerless. I don't have a vote.
Right.
And unfortunately, our culture, like you said, so quickly jumps to this place of, it's happening to me, I'm a victim, I can't help it, which is, you know, I think a way that we get attention and we get off the hook. There's lots of reasons we go there as humans, and it's okay. It's part of our human nature. And at the same time, it means if I want to hold those stories and have that viewpoint, it means I forfeit all my power.
Right. And
Yeah.
and also, so how does this connect to a feeling of being stuck versus having
Hmm.
clarity?
Yeah. So um, I've coached so many people, and I have seen such a correlation, such a pattern between um, like willingness to own life and how much that creates clarity or not. So 9 times out of 10, if somebody calls me and they say like, oh, I'm so stuck, or I don't know what to do, or I've been in this confusion for a long time, when we do digging, at the root of it, there's almost always this unwillingness to own life. Like, I'm willing to choose, I'm willing to trust myself, I'm willing to take risks, to really own, it's my life, and I get to own it and do whatever I want to do. When we are embrace that, always something starts to open up. When we resist it, that's like always creates stuckness, confusion, things get muddy because we're not willing to own it. Like, how could we have a clarity of a path to follow if we're not willing to take a step?
Right, right. Well, and
Mhm.
it's so important to look at what is the backstory. What are the things that are behind that? And I can remember with a mentor when times I would share with her, like, I feel I feel confused, or I'm not sure what to do, or the next step. She gave me the awareness that confusion is actually a form of fear. Right? If
Mhm.
we actually stay in the energy of confusion, or not knowing, we are second guessing ourselves, and we're in a place of fear that doesn't allow us to move forward. So that's where
Mhm.
we can ask better questions, right? So instead of saying, like, hey, I feel confused, it's like, this is an interesting place where I'm at. Coming from a place of power, it's like, okay, how is that feeling actually serving me, right? That's going back to, like, what's it doing for me? And
Mhm.
by owning your power, you're not in confusion. You're maybe in transition. You're maybe looking at different possibilities. This is where words become also very powerful, so that we can actually evolve into, like, how can this be different, versus being in a state of, this is how it is. And that's
Mhm.
where you would stay in that stuckness. Are you seeing some of those patterns?
Oh, absolutely. Everything you said, absolutely. Um, I had a mentor once that called it isness. When we speak with isness, like it just is this way. And how it creates like a permanence to something that's really just a feeling, an interpretation. But like with facts versus interpretations again, am I interpreting stuckness or is it a fact? Like, no, I just feel this way right now. And I want to be clear, none of this is to deny the feelings of um, when life is hard or confusing. It's not to deny those feelings or sweep them under the rug. It's how to feel them and then have another choice. Like feel it and then get back to like our own power. Like, no, this isn't the end of the story. I have so many other options. And bringing
Hmm.
ourselves back to like, no, I can move through this. Right.
Right, definitely. Well, as we're looking at, what are some of those things that we're standing into? How are we, being in our power, and what are some of the things that are taking us out? How do you
Mhm.
utilize commitment as a way to launch yourself forward?
Oh man, it's one of my favorites. So commitment. So as a coach, what I'm doing with people all the time is, making commitments to move life forward. And I have found doing the work to make those commitments well, it makes all the difference. What I see often is people will kind of throw themselves into a commitment without thinking about it. And it's usually, if we're not really clear about our own success and worth, we're just going to create more sabotage, right? So sometimes it looks like somebody making a commitment that's impossible to keep, or like so outrageous, it's like, that's not going to happen. Um, And it's really just a clever undermine to your own success. Like, see, I'm just gonna, like, at the end of the day, we're just writing a story that is failure. Um, so being really clear, like, is this commitment really setting me up to win? Is this setting me up to be the person I get to be? Is this really gonna move me forward, or is this just a clever sabotage to kind of double down on, see, I can't do it, see, I'm not enough, or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I love the mindfulness around the commitment, because so often, people will just say, "Oh, I'll do this," without really looking at, what are you actually committing to.
Mm-hmm.
And, what I've found is that the commitments that we break to ourselves are actually that much more damaging. I mean, a lot of times we can actually hold a commitment for somebody else, but when we break our own commitments, that then undermines our sense of power, our sense of moving forward, and being able to make a shift or difference. So how
Mm-hmm.
can you actually make more empowering commitments?
Um, some of it, I want to speak to what you just said. Some of being empowered in your commitment is relating to commitment everywhere, keeping commitments everywhere. Um, it's not just, oh, I have this one commitment over here that I'm going to be mindful to, and I'm going to keep no matter what, and then break all the little ones, especially like you said, to ourselves. That's where
Right.
it gets sneaky. Because every time we keep our word, keep a commitment, it's like putting money in the bank. We're like, yep, I'm acknowledging it. Like, yep, doubling down. I can trust myself. I keep my word. I'm committed. And it matters. There's none, we can't dismiss any of them. We get to
Right.
honor all of it. It's like a place to come from. I'm a committed person
Hmm.
versus I can choose what I'm committed to. Not because it's some right way to do it. That's just how to actually be powerful in life when we
Right.
trust ourselves in our commitment, right?
And is that along the lines of the tenet of, like, how we do one thing is how we do everything?
Exactly. Who I am anywhere is who I am everywhere. It's
Right.
all fulfilling. But that's good news because that means anywhere that we are, aligned, keeping our word, keeping our power, it translates everywhere. So it's not separate. It's not like, oh, I kept my word about walking my dog today when I told him I'd walk him. And then it's over here, I'm going to go to the gym or not, and keep my word there or not. It's all connected. And it builds us who we are and how we relate to ourselves as if we can trust our own word of
Right. Well, and can
commitment.
you speak into like the point that most people miss
Mm-hmm.
in terms of, kind of forgetting about the process and just looking straight for the result?
Yeah. So I think there's this magic phase when we are in a committed goal. So let's say that I'm just going to make one up. Let's say it's like, oh, I'm committed to losing 10 pounds, something like that, or 15 pounds. And, in the next 2 months. And then we go along, and we're like, well, are we on track? I think so, and then we get towards the end and it's like, oh crap, I've got a week and I still have 5 pounds to lose or 10 pounds. Something that we have that moment of like, we're looking ahead and we're gauging, I don't think I'm going to make it. That is such a magical moment. And this is where most people quit. They're like, well, from right now, from if I look at my history and what I've been capable of doing, that would say I'm not going to make it. We quit versus sticking it in. Because when we stick in, that's when we can level up. Like, okay, really, what would this require of me? Not just to get it handled, like check it off a list, but to really go for it. Like, what would this require of me? Like, would it be my passion, my power, my confidence, my love, my vulnerability, my trust? And then what would it look like? Like, let's say it's the gym thing with 10 times. Actually, this happened to me recently where I made a weight commitment, a health commitment, and I was at the end and I was 2 ounces away and I was like, oh, crap. And I was going to Disneyland that day. So I ate celery all day at Disneyland. I was doing high knees in the line. I was running from line to line. But my point is because I was like so outrageous. And when we get to commitments and we see like, hey, what is this requiring of me really to make this happen? That outrageousness, that over the top effort or beingness, because it's who we are being in it, not just the stuff we're doing, that always opens up a part of ourselves that we didn't have access to before. And I really, truly believe that certain commitments call to us to have us in that magic zone so we can be that person. It's not actually about the 5 pounds, 10 pounds. It's not about the extra, $5,000 you want to make this month. It's really that is speaking to me so I can be that person, that I can access that part of me. That's why that goal is calling to me from the very beginning.
Right, right. Well, it's that building of that grit, right? And that perseverance and being that person that can move through things. I can remember, times when I was on the police department and there were times where I had to really stand up some very harrowing situations where it was like, once I did that, it was like, okay, I built that part of that muscle so that I could then be more courageous and do more of that, not just in my police work, but as a parent, as a mentor, as, people that would, it goes through the different aspects of your life. So I love that extra part of who you're being in the process, in part of that commitment, because that's where we build our character, is really being in the moment with ourselves and not letting ourselves down. And I remember one of my mentors had also shared with me about how, a lot of times people will see like the ultra successful people as something about them being special or different. But a lot of times it's just, they stood the longest, like they just didn't give up. And if you just don't quit and you just do the next best step, it is those little increments that make huge shifts and changes. And if you just keep working through it and moving through it, you will see some of that light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, I love it. So I would love for you to speak about, you talked a little bit about standing for your future self. What does that look like?
Oh, so like I said, like getting a really clear idea about what do I want? What do I see for my future? Right. And then also like incorporating the beingness. Who am I being in that future? Because if we don't incorporate the experience we're looking for, it's like cutting yourself off at the knees, right? It's kind of the difference between, oh, I want to be in a committed relationship versus I want to be in a loving, happy, committed relationship. Like, so putting the distinction on what the experience is, who I'm being in it. So really painting that picture for your future. And it's not from attachment. It's not from like, it has to be this way or it doesn't count. It's just from having a clear, it's almost like drawing a line between where I am and the direction I'm going. And
Right.
then when I have that clear picture of my future self, using that as a guidepost, like a North Star, a compass to guide me in, like, what would my future self do right now? How would
Mm-hmm.
she handle this? Or am I serving her right now? Am I being kind to my future self, or am I creating a mess for her to handle?
Yeah.
And using that as like just a quick check-in of, like, whether it's, do I date this person? Do I spend this money? Do I eat this pizza? And not from a
Right.
place of shaming or blame, just from like a different way to love yourself. Is this
Right.
contributing love to me in the future that I'm committed to?
Right. Well, I think it's so important to do that future visioning, because you look at, okay, this is the person I want to be, this is the experiences I want to have, this is what it looks like. Well, what if you take a couple steps back, who do you need to be in order to step into that and to be that? And it does come down to those simple, things. It's like, hey, if I want to have epic health, do I have that piece of pizza, or do I have maybe some steamed vegetables, right? And it's not to say you can't dress those things up and make it something that you love in it, but each one of those choices either takes you a step closer to who you want to be or experience, or takes you a step back in that. So I love how you are talking about creating the experience that you want, and also the environment that you want to have in order to have you step into that, which reminds me of one of the questions I love asking my guests is, we have different experiences in our environments. We feel differently in our bedroom versus our kitchen versus our office. So
Mhm.
keeping that in mind, what is your favorite room in your home and why?
My favorite room in my home is my backyard.
Ah,
My backyard, I have lights hanging everywhere. I have a fire pit. I have chairs. Anyone who comes to my house ends up in my backyard for long fireside sits. I drag my computer out there. I work out there, take phone calls out there. Hands down, my favorite.
I love it. I love the whole indoor outdoor living, about really extending your outdoor experience to actually let you be in nature. So I love that as your favorite spot. So Lyndsay, I know that our listeners are going to want to stay in contact with you, and I know that you have a special offer for them as well. So would you like to share that?
Yeah, the best way to get in contact with me, honestly, is shoot me a text. Shoot me a text, shoot me an email. Do you want me to give my information, or is that going to be included somewhere?
You can go ahead and put it here, and we'll have it in the show notes as well. But for people driving and might want to have it right away, you can go ahead and put it in there.
Yeah, my phone number is 541-921-7934. Call me, text me, and or my email as well is Lyndsay@coachinglifealchemy.com. And Lyndsay is Lyndsay at coachinglifealchemy.com. And my offer, I'm offering a free discovery call, a call to be an inquiry, and whether that's like, hey, what is my future self? What is that? What's that path look like? Maybe, hey, what are those limiting beliefs that are getting me? Where am I leaking my power, leaking my energy? Anything that you've noticed, like, whoa, I'd like to explore that more. Happy to get on the phone with you and find something for you that's going to free you up and have you see how powerful you really are.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks for that.
Mhm.
And,
Yeah.
one of the things along the journey here, and I think it's so helpful for when people get to hear kind of a personal experience of when you have felt, disempowered, and then how you've actually leveraged that to then stand in your power. Something I didn't know about you is, around kidney donation. I'd love for you to share a little bit about that story and what that journey was.
Yeah, it's been about 5, 6 years now. It's actually I got the opportunity to donate a kidney to a woman I met in a coaching workshop. So really phenomenal. It felt like a phenomenal coincidence, and of course it was purposeful. And really, at first when it happened, I was like, yeah, of course I'll get tested. I'd be happy to do this for you. And in my mind, I'd made up, of course I'm the kind of person that would do this nice giving thing. And then after the test came back and they said, you're a match, I realized, like, holy cow, I am not the person that would do this nice giving thing. I've not met the woman that would be able to deliver on this yet. And I got to do some really deep work to become the woman that would do it, like authentically be courageous, be giving, be like loving to another person. And it was a great reality check of seeing who I thought I was versus like actually being her, and then getting to cultivate it. And I'm so glad I had the opportunity. I mean, what I got out of it, I swear it has to be more than what she got out of it. I feel like I got to really meet myself.
Right. I so appreciate that because, sometimes, people can see on the surface like, oh, that's a great thing to do. But to actually, this is a perfect example of actually being in the process, right? We know the result, right? It's all of
Mhm.
the great part of that. But who you got to be in that process, I
Mhm.
thought would be just a great example for people to listen to that, it really is being in the trenches and seeing what's true for
Mhm.
you and being able to move through that. So, any final thoughts for our listeners?
Oh man, my final thoughts are, um, if you're in a tough spot or you're struggling or you're noticing that something's happening again, it's really good news. We can't have a breakthrough in something unless we're in the middle of it. We can't consult a breakthrough. We can't be at arm's length and expect to have a massive transformation. So the good news is anything that you're in the middle of, that means you are primed for your breakthrough, for your massive opportunity to open up. So lean in and do the work because it's right in front of you.
Perfect. Great advice.
Mhm.
Thank you so much for your wisdom and for being
Mhm.
here on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
You got it. And for our listeners, you are the reason we're here. We know that your time is your biggest asset, and we so appreciate you spending it here with us. And in order to get these type of positive messages and helpful information out to our community, we need your help to expand it, to rate and review, and to share it and get it out there in the world so that you can have more of it. And please subscribe so that you get all the information in a timely fashion. And until we meet again, live your spa life. Bye for now. Bye-bye.